Hello, I'm Mr. Dady, and today we are going to talk more about equations and specifically two-step equations. So with a two-step equation, all it is what it says, basically. We did one step before in the previous video, which was just adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing equations. Now, we're going to take two of those, such as adding and dividing, and we're going to put them together into one equation and solve it, a two-step equation. So the first one we're going to do is 2x minus 6 equals 10. Right? And if you watched the other video, the first thing I always do is I draw a wall and then I label it. It's a number, letter, combination, is a number, and a number. We're trying to get all the numbers on one side and keep the letters on the other side. All right? You do not have to do this. This number is actually a coefficient. That's a variable. This whole thing is the number, the -6. It is a constant. That is a constant also. So if you're actually doing math terms, you're going to get your constants together and your variables together. So, if you remember watching the last video, we want to work from far out to the variable. So we want to get what is away from the variable first. So here we have a number and a letter. They're combined right now. So we want to get rid of the number that's outside of it first. So if you remember from addition and the subtraction parts of the equation, I have -6 here. So what am I going to do to both sides first? I'm going to add 6 because I need to move that across the wall. When I move it across the wall, I do the inverse operation. So the inverse operation of subtraction is addition. This gives me 0, so they cancel each other out. 10 plus 6 is 16. Now we're just down to a one-step equation. What is being done here is multiplication between the number and the letter. So what is the inverse operation of multiplication? Division. So then I divide both sides by 2. My final answer, because these cancel out, 16 divided by 2 is 8. And now something that I'm going to show you that you need to learn how to do is a check. This is important for other reasons later on, but to do a check, all you do is take the original equation that you had and you plug in what you got at the end. So we got x equals 8. So if x equals 8 here, x will equal 8 there. So all we do is plug in that 8 using our order of operations. 2 times 8 is 16, minus 6, it does equal 10. Check. All right, you need to know how to plug in what you got back in for the variable. All right, we're going to do our second example here. Negative 3x plus 2 equals 11. Draw my wall. Label everything. Now you don't have to label it. This is just, I found that it helps some students understand exactly what we're putting together. So we're trying to get all the numbers together and the letter separated. So the first thing we need to do is, if you have, another way to say this is if you have any constants on the outside, you want to get them together. Because this -3 is technically a coefficient. So first thing you want to do is get your constants together, or your like terms. So our like term here is plus 2 and 11. So what is the opposite of adding 2? Subtracting 2. Bring our negative 3x down. This gives us 0, and this gives us 9. So now, our next step is to get the x alone. What is being done here is multiplication. So the opposite of multiplication is division. Now, we have a positive and a negative, and we are dividing. If we go back to our happy face, so a positive and a negative, what does that give us? gives us a frowny face. So what's our answer gonna be? Negative. So then 9 divided by 3 is 3. Now we have to check it. So we do negative 3x plus 2 equals 11. And that is exactly what we had right here. So now we're just taking what we got here and we're plugging it in up here. So negative 3 times negative 3 plus 2. Negative 3 times negative 3, again, if we do the face, we do negative and negative, that gives us a smiley face. So that's 9 plus 2, 11. And 11 equals 11, so our check is good. All right, now for our third example. Now we're going, the first two examples we did were dealing with multiplication as your coefficient. These two examples are going to be dealing with division between your coefficient and your variable. So first thing we do, we draw the wall. We label it. I have a letter number, or you can call it number letter up there, because they're still combined. We have a number and another number, constants, coefficient, variable. So we have to get rid of, we have to combine like terms. That's always your first step, combine like terms. If you haven't seen that before, there's another video on here. You can go look at it for combining like terms. So these are our like terms because they're both numbers. We add 4, add 4. That cancels each other out. You get x over 2. Negative 7 plus 4 is negative 3. All right? So now if you remember, if you went back and watched the equations with division, what is the opposite of division? It's multiplication. So I have to multiply this whole thing by 2, and I multiply this whole side by 2. That makes these 2's cancel out, gives me x left over. Negative 3 times 2 is negative 6. Now for the check, we write the original equation right here. Then we plug in what we found our x to be. So that gives me negative 3 minus 4 equals negative 7. Is that correct? Yes. All right, now we move on to another problem you might not have seen before. This is a multiplication problem, but you do it the same way you do a division problem. That might not make sense, but let me show you something first. So this, which I have, is negative 1/3 x. That is the same exact thing as saying negative x over 3. So as we just saw with the last problem, when you have negative x over 3, you just multiply by what's on the bottom, correct? That was the opposite of division. Here you are going to do the same thing, but you are going to take what is called the reciprocal of the number. The reciprocal means you just flip it over. And we will get to that in a second, but first we have to combine our other like terms, or the like terms. So we have a number letter, number, and number. I subtract 2. That cancels this out. 5 minus 3, 2 is 3. So now we get to this. So what should we do? All right, so all we have to do, what would you do here? You'd multiply the whole thing by negative 3, right? So what are you going to do for this one? Multiply the whole thing by negative 3. Let me switch my color. Or negative 3 over 1. It's the same exact thing. I'm even going to write it, but I'll write it the same way. All right? Because this, negative 3 over 1, is the same thing as just saying negative 3, because anything divided by 1 is itself. So then these cancel each other out. You have x left over, and then you have negative 9. See? I messed up. But I would fix that, and I'd figure that out in my check. Check is very important, because you're going to have to be able to plug stuff back in, especially when you do systems and stuff like that. Now, I know you all hate fractions. For some reason, everybody does. But this isn't a very difficult problem. Why it is not is because when you multiply this, you have to multiply across the top. So negative times a negative gives me a positive. So the negatives go away. Gives me 9 over 3, which simplifies to 3. 3 plus 2 is 5. 5 equals 5. Check. All right? And this is how you do two-step equations. All it is basically two one-step equations put together. And that's it. All right? The newest thing is this. All right? Don't get confused about it. It's the same thing. All right? If you have any other questions, you can watch some of the other videos. You can go back and watch the one entitled Equations, Add, Subtract, Multiply, and Divide.